First step is to brine the meat. What I've got here is my cooler to keep this overnight. I'm going to brine overnight generally. I've got 5 gallons of water, 5 cups of salt. And then in here I've got my ribs, I've got my pork shoulder, and add a bag of ice to this, put the lid on the cooler, and let it brine overnight. The next morning, once the meat's been brining overnight for about 12 hours, it's generally good, take the meat out of the cooler and put it onto some racks to dry. This is my smoker unit from Cabela's. This is the Master Sportsman Elite. It's their full-size smoker. As you can see inside, there's 6 racks to hold a lot of meat. Separate door to access the tinderbox. Nice feature about this is when you open this, all the smoke stays inside the smoke box. So it's still one continuous chamber. You got dual burners that use standard propane for the fuel source. To get the smoke box ready for use, you'd add your meat here. Fill the water pan with water. Fill the wood box with wood chips. You can find various brands of wood chips. There's Western, country brand, apple, cherry, whatever you like. Get the smoker ready. Just go ahead and fill the water pan up. And then fill the smoke box up with your wood chips. I'm going to use apple today. Once you have the gas turned on, it's just as simple as turning those over and using the push button start. The fire's already started. I'll let this come to temperature and then I'll start to add the meat. What you can do is just use a clean dish towel to take the extra moisture off the surface of the meat and get it ready for your dry rub. I don't like to use a lot of paper towels. I'll use these tea towels and then I'll bleach them in the laundry so I know they're clean and I know that I can reach for them anytime instead of using paper towels. Before the meat goes in the smoker, we'll hit it with a dry rub. This dry rub is a mixture of equal parts of chili powder, dry mustard, garlic powder, dried thyme leaves, onion powder, and then salt and sugar. Depending on how much you have, you're going to want to make a volume that's enough to cover all the meat that you're doing. So I actually used 1/3 cup of each of these ingredients. You will probably want to adjust accordingly. I mean, if you're just doing a single rack of ribs, you can probably do about 2 tablespoons of each ingredient. Once you get your spice mix put together, go ahead and get your meat and then just sprinkle it on the meat. It's a really kind of a misnomer to call this rub. You'll find that if you try to rub this on, you'll really just get it all over your fingers. It's just gonna make a mess. Best thing to do is just kind of do it lightly, sprinkle it on, and basically just cover all the surfaces, but don't spend a lot of time rubbing it because it's just going to make a big sticky mess. Just sprinkle it on, especially on the wet side like this. You can go ahead and just sprinkle it on. It'll stick. You won't need to rub it at all. I'll go ahead and do this to all the ribs and the shoulder. Once the smoker comes to temperature, I can go ahead and load it up with the meat. Here you can see I've got my ribs, I've got my pork shoulder in here, and then I've got 4 more sets of ribs. I've also hooked up an internal probe on the pork shoulder And then I've got an alligator clip that is taking the internal temperature of the smoke box. Cabela's did a nice job on these latches. They're a two-part latch. Swing that into place and close the buckle down. Here you can see where I've routed the leads out of the internal thermometers into a ThermoWorks thermometer. This shows this is going to the box itself, and then this is plugged into that pork shoulder inside there. The internal temperature of the smoke box is 160 degrees. The pork shoulder is still frozen at this point. It's 20 degrees. So at a nice low temperature here, that shoulder will thaw out in good time. I'll come back and check this thermometer every hour or so and just make sure I keep a nice low temperature. I don't want this temperature above 250, 300 degrees. I'll be cooking the meat. This meat needs to stay in the smoke box all day, and I'm going to want to keep this at a nice low temperature. All right, it's been about 4 hours now. Been watching the temperature here, and we're sitting at about 250 degrees, which is perfect. It's exactly where I want to be. Nice and slow, nice low temperature. Let this thing run all day. We can take a look and see what's going on. Let's see. These look just about done. We can see the way the meat's pulling away from the bones. This is just about done. This is nice and tender and nice drip. Nice thing about this smoker is that as the meats cook and the fat renders, the fat drips down on the next bit and kind of bastes the next piece. And then as it gets further down, there's a water pan in the bottom to protect the meat from the heat and to catch that fat so you don't get a grease fire coming up with black smoke. Always good to keep monitoring the temperature when you're smoking like this. You can see here the temperature of the smoke box just hit 230. Keep in mind I just had the box open. I was showing you guys what was inside there. So that's coming up very slowly. And then this is the internal probe on the pork shoulder. That's 137 right now. And we really want to get that up to about 200, so we got a ways to go. Well, here it is. Here's the finished product. It's a couple more hours after we last checked the smoker, but the shoulder is sitting around 170 now. The ribs are done. The ribs look good. I'll cut these in half and put these in vacuum sealed bags. The shoulder itself, I'll split in half, and these will go in a couple of Le Creuset in the oven. Pour a little bit of apple juice in the bottom of the pans just to give it a nice, hot, moist environment. Set your oven to 250, 300 degrees, and let them go until the internal temperature on the pork shoulder reaches about 200 degrees. Once you hit that magic number of about 200 degrees on the internal temperature of the meat, go ahead, pull it back out of the oven, use a couple of forks and shred it, and mix it up with some barbecue sauce and serve it on some home-baked bread, and you'll have some delicious eats for quite a few people. Thanks for watching, everybody.